See some familiar faces here. As Bruce mentioned this morning, well, he wasn't there, but first thing in the morning, I get a glass of water, drink it before I have my coffee. Didn't think anything of it. But many of our Indigenous communities don't have that luxury. Now, a lot of clubs in our district and throughout the world have clean water projects in other countries. But we've had members say, what can we do as Rotarians help our Indigenous community? And with that, I'm going to have my fellow club member Steuart give a presentation of a possible solution.
Thanks, Gord. Oh, that's even better. You don't have to keep hearing me say like slide.
It's view.
Okay. There we go. Perfect. And so as Gord said, a lot of us looked and said, we're doing water projects all over the world. Why aren't we doing them in our backyard? And so we started doing a little bit of research. And what we found is some pretty staggering statistics. That across Canada, there's 14% of First Nations that are under boil water advisory don't have clean water. In Ontario, it's even worse. It's over 25% that don't have it. So as you do a little bit of research into it, because as a taxpaying Canadian, I figured that shouldn't have been a problem. According to the Indian Act, which is a very poorly named piece to start with, is the federal government's responsible for installing the plants in the various communities. That's where their responsibility ends. So when you see places like Nunavut that have diesel in their systems, that's not the federal government's responsibility, that's the local community's responsibility. So a lot of these they've just failed on the maintenance side because nobody's trained, nobody's well funded to actually do the maintenance side of it. So we looked at it and said, we haven't done any business and work like this in Canada, but pardon the pun, why reinvent the wheel? So we went out and did some research, and Guelph and Peterborough had already done a project similar to this. As we started doing the research, Northern Ontario District 7010 was doing one as well. And we took a look and said, how are they doing it? Because as everybody in Rotary knows, you can't just show up in a community and say, hey, I've got all the ideas to fix your community and make things better. Because people don't want people showing up and telling them what they're doing wrong. So they introduced us to a group called Water First. So Water First is an organization based in Creemore, which is about halfway between Toronto and Collingwood. And they've actually started similar to what Rotary was doing. They were doing projects in Africa on clean water. And some of their founders and some of their organizations said the same thing that we did, except 10 years ago, is why don't we do more work in Canada? So they reached out and actually built a team, including Indigenous communities, to start looking at what the problem was. So who is Water First? Their mandate is all about education and training for Indigenous communities across Canada. So being in Ontario, their first focus was Ontario, but they've got over 80 relationships right across the country. And they have a number of different programs that they work on. We're focused on just one of their programs. And the program we're working with them on is what they call their internship program. So their goal is to train Indigenous people, specifically youth and specifically women when they can, to actually get out there and be able to operate their own systems. So once they're up and running, now they can be operating as they go forward. So what is this program? So it's about a 15-month training opportunity. The key piece is we looked at it because we always want to do sustainable programs as well, is it's a paid opportunity. So every community that has students that go to this, they're actually paid for that 15 months. So we'll talk about the wraparound programs as well. And that's one of the key pieces as they go through, because who can take 15 months out of their program, out of their life to go to a training program when you've got family at home? So that's why you see some of the success rates that they've had. About 2,000 hours, and it's a lot of in-plant training. So that's where part of the pay is, and part of the expenses for these guys, is they've got to travel around to different plants that are functioning, actually do their training. There's training workshops, and Water First is completely handling all of this. So we're a funding organization as opposed to a participatory kind of organization. The other key thing out of this is they're actually getting certifications. These are not Water First certifications, these are not Indigenous certifications, these are government certifications. So they can actually go off and work outside the communities if they want. They can go to Hamilton, they can go to Toronto and do work as well. They can use this to get further education. So it's not a unique piece to actually training them in what everybody else can go through and do in college. And you've got work placements as you go forward. Obviously, with the remote communities, online training is key as well, because a typical class has about 16 people in it from 8 different communities, because they're always trying to train 2 people from every community, because everybody likes to take a day off once in a while. Want to make sure you've got multiple people being able to do it and mentor people going forward. So that's why they actually also provide some of the wraparound support. Childcare being one of the top ones, because as they're trying to attract more women to this field, you know, they're often left with the childcare needs, and you can't afford to go away without having that childcare in the background. And then things we don't even think about, not just the water side, and not just computer literacy, but the equipment. You know, if I'm in a remote community, do I really have reliable internet to be able to sign on, even if I did have the equipment? Everybody can ship a computer, you know, to Canada Post somewhere, but if I don't have the ability to connect to anything, that's bad. If I've never had a computer, I have no literacy. So it's all those wraparound supports to make that program work well. So I talked about sustainability. This is another thing, is we're looking as a funding organization to get involved, is we want to make sure that it's something that's out there that actually works. It isn't like a one-time fix. So this is numbers as of last year, 47 interns from 32 different First Nations have already passed their tests. They've not just gone through the program, but actually gone through the certification of the test, which is a pretty big number considering which way they go. So numbers, 85,000 hours. The other piece we looked at from our club specific is, 40% currently are women going through the program, which is ideal for what a lot of the Indigenous communities are trying to do, and as well as some of our goals from 1918 to do some empowerment on the women's side. So the retention, because they've already been through a number of classes, is strong. 75% in a retraining program is actually a pretty good number. Is it as good as it could be? Water First will tell you no, but they're striving to make that better and better. One of the number one reasons for that is because they're paid. The communities are actually supporting them. So it's not just Water First paying for it. As you look at their funding model, each community that sends students, it's their responsibility to pay those interns. Because one of the questions is always, if they haven't paid for maintenance up to now, how are they going to pay for maintenance going forward? Because they made that financial commitment at the beginning, they're making a financial commitment when they go back to the communities to actually fund that maintenance as it goes forward. So again, we want to make sure it's sustainable as it goes forward. So this is just, every time you do a slide, you got to do kind of a big smack slide just to show you what they've done so far. So they started this program in 2017, and this is just a straight list of all the different communities they've done. Their focus again has been Ontario to start, just because they had to figure out where the programs they want to do and get the certifications. All the certifications that they do are provincial level certifications, not federal. So they're working on Manitoba's certifications, they're working on BC certifications as well. And we're likely targeting assisting in a class in 2025 that will actually be in Manitoba. We haven't picked it yet because we just started off the program as we move through. So just on full transparency from a cost perspective, the cost for one student going through these programs is between $130,000 and $150,000. Sounds like a lot of money. When we first looked at it, we said, wow. So we sat down and broke it down. Remember that's paid. So if you take out all the salary and the accommodation pieces, now it gets down to much more affordable. And that part is 100% paid by the communities. So it's not paid by the other piece. The other piece falls under corporate sponsorship and any donations they get from various organizations. Rotary's been one. Ryan Reynolds and his wife gave $500,000 last year to it. So it is an expensive piece, and I'll tell you, when we went to our board and said, we want to start raising money for this. And they said, wow, you know what, for $150,000, how much we could do in Africa? And the answer is yes. It is significantly cheaper in other countries to do it. Doesn't make this not a viable piece. And as a funder, we're not responsible for a full student. We're not responsible for the program failing. We're contributing to it to make that class go better. So how can we help? So what we're doing is we're doing a number of fundraising activities. And this is one of them. We're coming around with our hats out and begging for money. You know, there's no better way for me to say it as we go forward. Is we're gonna look at doing some other fundraising over the year. We're doing this for about a year, 16 months is really our fundraising target. Got a number of different numbers in there. Unfortunately, because of the way this program works, it doesn't qualify for global grants because we're not doing the program, we're as a funder for somebody else. So we're looking at other ways and other grants that are out there. But Guelph has already failed and Northern Ontario is most of the way through failing getting a global grant. So we're really just looking for donations as we go forward. We think it's a worthwhile cause and we're moving forward on that. So we've left you the presentation. So we've got a link set up. But just want to really introduce that we're doing this. So as you see more stuff coming through from a marketing perspective from 1918, you'll know why we're doing it.
How much have you raised from the other clubs in this area?
So the other clubs made north of $100,000 each.
No, so
Oh, how much have we done from other clubs?
some from, yeah, in the area 10, or what do you? 910, area 910.
So we've just started.
Okay,
So we have not got, it's nothing worth talking about. So when we say we just started, we did our first presentation Tuesday. So we'll see some other fundraisers from us, just so you know, we'll call them Canadian water initiatives. So Water First has specifically asked us not to tie any alcohol to these programs. But they're okay if they're not tied together, we raise them in the side. So we do have beer at Walkerville right now, and you'll see it out in the park. But you can buy ahead of time. It's a Rotary beer. We're getting a kickback from Walkerville into our coffers for that.
That's good.
As well, you'll see something coming out from Cooper's Hawk as well. So we're doing a fundraising with Cooper's Hawk where we're doing specialized art in the park labels. That's going to go into some of our fundraising for both domestic and international water projects as well.
Kind of question, when you said Guelph, for example, failed in getting a global grant, what does it take to get a global grant? Why did they fail?
So the main reason is reason they were rejected was because we're acting more like a funding organization. Then Rotary is not the lead on it. So when we do wells in Ghana, for instance, Rotary is considered the lead and they've got the employees, and that's where Rotary's rules are. So we've got some people looking at it to see if there's different ways to spin the project to see if we can fit in the global grants. But so we're relying on what they've done and some of the other people we've got within our district that are experienced at doing the grants. But the main reason is we're not the lead on this. We're not delivering the education. We're not drilling any wells. We're not doing those things. We're just funding money.
So as a funding model, they can't get a global grant.
Correct. Yes.
So you said the cost is $150,000 per student,
Yeah.
but a lot of the employee costs, salaries, all that stuff is covered by.
The originating communities. Yeah.
So would it be better if we tell people, okay, the cost we're trying to fund. How much are we trying to fund? Are we trying to fund 50,000? Is it 75,000? Because I mean.
So our goal is about $100,000. If we can do what the other clubs have done up to this point.
Per student.
For student or for the whole thing?
For the whole thing. We are not,
15 students.
yeah, we're not gonna come anywhere near funding an entire program. And we're not expecting to. We're just gonna be one of the contributors to that program. The reason I tell people $150,000 is I want to be completely transparent and honest on where the costs are. Because as we talked internally to our group and you compare Canadian costs to working in Africa, there was a huge sticker shock. And I'm a former sales guy. So I'd much rather give you sticker shock at the beginning and then walk you through it than have someone come up and say, wow, we raised $20,000, aren't we great? It's like, yes, we're great for $20,000, but give you really understanding of how much things cost in Canada. This is how we're contributing as we go forward.
So as a follow on, how much is the non-wage cost per student?
It's I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I think it's between 55% and 60% of that number. So $75,000, $8,000, somewhere in that neighborhood.
How small are the communities that have these water facilities? Like, some of these villages are very, very tiny. You wonder how they could have, I'll say, manage the funds to support somebody just to maintain the equipment.
So they do get federal funding as well for certain pieces. But yeah, I don't know the exact answer to that. I can follow up with the Water First guys on how small they can get to. But yeah, it's still something that they're dependent on, and whatever their tax base and their income base is to get those pieces. So are there communities that are too small? That's something that I don't want to discuss on what's too small from that perspective. I don't know if that's a bit of a non-answer, but
The model, if I'm understanding this, Water First goes in the community and says, we want to support water treatment in your community. Will you support it by providing support for the staffing costs and all of that?
yeah,
And then Water First raises the money for the rest of the program to put that class through the education programs.
Correct.
And then they go out and seek funders like you guys and other organizations provide what they're doing.
correct, absolutely.
So roughly $2.5 million project, they're raising 50 to 60% of that to other organizations.
Yes, absolutely. And they've got corporate sponsors. They're an NGO, so you can donate directly to them as well. They've got a variety of organizations they work with. But yeah, they're a nonprofit as well. And they're doing the same thing we're doing. We're just helping them out to get some money in the door.
And how long has the program been running?
So the first graduation class was 2018.
Those communities that went through the program, saying have very good intentions, but they're actually getting the treatment that they need in their communities.
Absolutely. And they're using them as mentors for the next classes that are coming through. So they're expanding out that way as they go forward.
Is there a reason, I think you said Manitoba, that you're targeting or looking at? Is there a reason it's Manitoba and not Northern Ontario or whatever, and staying in Ontario?
So the reason is they've got relationships all across the country, and they don't want to just stay in Ontario.
Oh,
And it's really down to the question here, which is which communities are willing to step up and say, I'm going to fund it. Because it's going to sound harsh, but you don't necessarily want to go train people in a community where they're not going to be funding it, because then those people aren't going to be able to get the opportunity to work on it. So they're going to go after the communities that are more aggressive and willing to fund it. And they want to be able to make this a national program. So my understanding, the reason that Manitoba is next is because they've had a couple communities that have stepped up in Manitoba and said, hey, we're ready to go and move forward.
interest and support and that from there,
Exactly.
so go there.
Yeah, so they're not doing the Field of Dreams where they'll say, hey, let's go to Manitoba and set everything up.
Yeah.
They're doing very opportunistic, which is if people in Manitoba are ready to do it, BC's on the list as well. There's communities in BC. There's quite a bit of work to change the programs, update the programs to meet the certifications requirements for the provinces. So they're gonna go where they know they've got communities ready to go and can fill up a class, because you've got to get 8 communities to fill up a class.
Yeah.
So it's not just one, it's like you want to get 8 communities in there to get those 16 students.
There's the first slides, Ontario is way behind in like.
Yeah,
Has a higher need.
yeah,
So I wondered why Ontario isn't.
Yeah, no, they're so good.
Makes sense.
as we've seen a couple slides ago, they've already done quite a few of the Ontario ones too. So they're gonna continue with Ontario. They just want to be able to make it bigger and wider as they go forward.
But isn't the real key to the success of this program the ongoing financial support from those communities? So they have to be prepared to take some of the infrastructure funds that are provided by the federal government and ensure that those funds are directed towards maintaining clean water.
Yes. And that's part of the selection process that Water First goes through. is they're getting those commitments from those communities. Now, do they stick with those commitments? They're politicians like everybody else, so. You know, what they get promised and what they actually happen, you know, they run into the same problems everybody else runs into dealing with their politicians, so.
Do you know the, or do you have the stats on the economic status of these communities?
I do
Are these impoverished communities, like, do they, I'm just wondering, like, what level on the, economic scale are we looking at with these communities?
I do not have that answer, but I've got a meeting with Water First later this week. I'm gonna ask that, because that's actually a really good question on their selection criteria a little bit, because. You know, you could argue that the extra impoverished ones need it more, but if they can't fund it, then,
Yeah.
so it's an
It seems
awkward,
it's
an awkward
important,
choice.
Kind of, criteria in the whole selection.
Yeah,
process.
yeah, I'll definitely follow up with that and follow up back with you guys on that.
Are community members where the graduates are not in place right now? Are they experiencing waterborne illnesses that we would see, say, in the developing country?
I don't know the answer to that either.
Because we have other people in Essex County are on well water. Granted, they may not have drinking it, they may be bringing in potable water, but there are areas in our driving distance that take water right out of the ground.
Yeah, but my brother's on a well, so he lives on Georgia Bay area. So yeah, there are things around wells. Some can some of the purification things are dealing with water as well. But I don't know the answer to that. But I'll follow up on that as well. Thank you.
Does Water First also get into the other half of this, which is the sanitation part? Because in many cases, they're probably drawing from, say, local streams and everything else. But in many cases, these communities don't necessarily have, I'll say, active sewage treatment programs. They're relying on septic tanks or other similar things.
Not at this level. So they do have a couple other programs they work on, which has to do with watershed restoration and maintenance. So they do touch on that part of it, but no, from a true sanitation perspective, that's not one of their expertise. And I'm sure if I talk to them, they have partners that they can work with on those things, but I agree 100% with you that that's often one of the number one problems. If you're just dumping all your stuff in the river, you're pulling the water out of, you know, it doesn't matter how good your purification is, it's not going to work. So there is involvement in it, but from a pure sanitation, sewage perspective, no, they don't actually do programs on that.
Yeah, just one thing to add, any donations are tax receivable.
Thanks, I forgot to mention it. Any other questions?
Questions that come from Dewey Chairman.
Mark has.
That's just the cursor.
We need to change the curse.
There are no more questions, so I would, on behalf of our club, who asked regularly over the years, how come we can help people in foreign countries get clean water and we don't have clean water in our own country? But I'd like to thank you, Gord, and you, Steuart, for telling us about the positive action that your club is taking to begin to address this issue. On behalf of the club, we'd like to present you with a little token.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Right, very good.
Can I have a photo?
And thank you. And I think Terry wants a picture.
Okay.
Or. And number 5 in this club.
Is it fun?
Is it fun? And it's gotta be fun everywhere. So a toast to Rotary, the finest students club in the world, Rotary International.
Rotary.
In the photo?
Yes, and let's get a photo with our ward here.
We look last.
Photo?
And you're gonna be in it.
Everybody run up, get today, let's take photos.
And I like pizza, but I like people down there. So, and you guys.
Wanna come?
Let's hammer that.
Meeting to follow, quick group picture and let's get out.
Yes.
Go. Put in the bill. Go. Small people in front. We'll be here in front.
Everything that part, yeah.
Trying to figure out how to do this.
Back
Or once you figure it out, let us know, okay?
You know, I mean, it's okay.
You got everybody.
That's not gonna work, Bill.
What's that? Like it's football.
Deborah, where's your cargo?
Lift it up. Yeah, that's the actual challenge.
Yeah, Bob, you had a cargo word too, get over here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
we never got a picture of Bob at this
I'll
point.
give them.
Okay, so he never told anybody he got it.
Your incoming president.
He didn't tell anybody he got it.
President, yeah.
No one knew in the district you had
And
it.
on the picture, your incoming president.
Okay, here.
Yes.
Picture.
Yeah,
Here.
all right.
All right.
Sharing the award is co-president, Bob.
A past cargo award winner.
All right.
Who was told
Like
that
one
no
more. One of these are gonna work.
I was out.
You know, that's a long way out. For us to nominate you as a cargo award.
Big investment.
Hi, everyone.
And I looked it up and you have one.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll go through
I just cut my wife's head off.
Okay.
I told her, "Hey, you're going to come
Yeah.
again?"
Monkey.
Yeah.